Hi, and welcome to the Chairman's Circle. I'm Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts, and I'm pleased to bring you this program where we meet interesting people, talk about important issues, and give you a chance to weigh in on social media. On today's program, I'm pleased to welcome a mother who went undercover to save her teenage daughter from a life in sex trafficking industry. And later, how one organization is doing its part to try to end this nightmare. It's all on the Chairman's Circle next. Today, I'm continuing the conversation about a crisis affecting middle school age boys and girls in Atlanta and Fulton County, the issue of sex trafficking. Now, if you don't know, the chairman's office, my office, created Fulton County government's task force on sex trafficking. This task force is working to develop policy recommendations and to identify resource gaps in meeting the needs of victims. This group is also looking into prevention strategies to keep children from being trafficked in the first place. The task force will also examine law enforcement and prosecution issues at the local, state, and federal levels. My first guest put her life on the line to save her daughter, who, as just a teenager, was caught up in this dangerous business. Angela Marie Paisley, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
I can't imagine what it would be like to find out that one's daughter or son is caught up in this. Take us through it.
It's a horrible feeling for a parent. You feel hopeless. It's a scary position to be in. And one thing I can say, through the power of prayer, I was able to muster up the strength to get us through this. So.
Well, how did you first find out that it was your daughter was involved? I mean, what happened?
Yeah, one thing about
I want to know. I mean, it's
awesome. One thing about human trafficking, I want people to understand there's many doors. And my daughter's situation, her door was actually the door of being a runaway. And that's a door.
Had she run away before?
Oh, yeah. She was going through that transition period.
And how old was she at the time?
At the time, she was 16.
Okay.
So she went through that stage of being very rebellious, wanted to do things her way, wanted to, grow up a little fast. And, at one time in life, I think we all can kind of experience, we went through that rebellious stage. But one thing about the world is such a big, bad place right now. And for young girls to just take off, running away, meeting people online, it opens the door for them to fall into such a public health crisis, because human sex trafficking is a health crisis, So Sade, she continued to run away. I had her put in through the juvenile systems. I had her put in juvenile. I went to the court system. I did everything I could as a parent.
So was she in school all this time?
She would skip school.
Were you raising her by yourself, or was her dad in the home?
That's the thing, with human trafficking, with the young girls. We lived in Gwinnett at the time. We had a $225,000 house. We were going
with her dad,
with her father, her stepfather. We did everything that we thought was right, And so I grew up, old school. My mom and grandmother was like, well, you can go over to your friend's house, but you can't spend a night, So I took those same principles with my daughter, and she just wasn't having it. I would be like, well, you can't spend a night, but you can, go and visit. She just wanted to do things her way. And so she went through that rebellious part in her life, and she continued to run away. And I actually had her locked down. The court system had her.
What do you mean locked down? What does
that mean? Locked down as far as with the courts, in juvenile detention centers.
In jail, incarcerated?
Juvenile. Because the judge was actually in favor of me trying to help us to keep her home. So every time she would run away, he would put her in for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. As far as with the juvenile, they would have her sit with counselors, trying to find out what is the reason why you're running away. Trying to get to the bottom of what was causing her to leave.
And what would she say?
And she would just say, Mom, I just want to do things my way. I mean, she just did not want to follow the rules. And, being close in age, we're about 23 years apart. I think that was a factor that she kind of looked at me as a sister more than a mother. So, yeah. we went through that stage. And with that stage, she was positioned in the juvenile detention center off of Camelton Road, I believe. And she ended up running away from that facility with like 4 or 5 other girls, and which I was devastated. I was like, I just could not believe that she would run away from a facility. And so she went out for 2 weeks and she partied and she lived it up, and you know, just
Now,
like
how do you know that? She told you that after the fact?
Yeah, she told me. But after that experience of being out there in the street, she got tired. And just like the prodigal son, she came to her inn and realized it's getting cold outside. And she wanted to come home. And it was the very day that she made a decision to come home that she was kidnapped. She was on her way to the train station, and a young
To come home?
Mm-hmm, to come home. And a young guy, he pulled up, nice looking guy, nice car. Hey, you need a ride to the train station? Of course, she said yes. She gets in the car. 5 minutes later, he pulls the gun out on her, tells her to call her mom and to let me know that she's okay, but she's never coming back. And I was just like, that's a red flag. She ended up leaving a message because I didn't answer the phone at the time. But when I got the message, instantly, as a mother in my spirit, I said, this is not my child. Something's wrong. First of all, she's never going to call home to tell me that she's not coming home. That was a red flag. And then I can just kind of hear it in her voice that something wasn't right. And sure enough, it wasn't. She was taken from that scene to Marietta. Within, I say, the next 4 or 5 hours, she was out on the streets in Atlanta, prostituting for a pimp.
So did she describe what he said to her and how it all?
Yeah, he threatened to kill her. He threatened to kill her. He threatened to kill me. He threatened to kill her family. They used the fear tactics so that she would never run away. Shotty was 16, but she looked like she was 12.
Okay, let me. Had she been sexually active before
Yes.
then? How do you know that?
Because she told me, and we took her to the doctor to make sure that she was protected if she decided to make those choices.
Okay, so then he put her on the street. Then what?
Yeah, he put her on the street, and for that first night, she did so many turns, which would mean she slept with so many different people. There was an incident that happened while she was out that night on the streets, and she actually was sold to another pimp. And because they trade women like they trade dollars or commodity, any other thing, she went from one pimp to another. One of the things that they noticed that she was very young, and so she was a risk of being caught. So the other pimp didn't want her because she looked like she was 12. So she stayed with another guy, and surprisingly, it's a lot of females that are actually into this human trafficking as well.
As pimps?
As pimps. And so these were older women, that were holding her, grown women holding a child, to do the acts that they are at age to make the decision to do. She was not at the age to make that decision to be out selling her body. So she was missing for about 6 months.
And you had no idea where she was?
No, but I beat the ground. I walked the street.
So even during this period of time, you
yes,
would be out looking for her?
I most definitely looked for my daughter. With a parent that's going through with a child with human trafficking or missing a child, it is not only physical, but it's spiritual. And so for me, it was a time where I had to really seek, inner peace so that I can focus on how can I get involved with the police department, how can I look up evidence. I watched all these detective shows. How can I really put my skills to the test to help break the case? And so that's what happened. I went to Zone 4 Police Department. I met with the chief. I met with Officer Mark House, who's my personal Denzel Washington. He helped me break the case. I was allowed to go undercover. I went undercover as...
So explain how all that works, and you talk with him. Was it his idea for you to go undercover?
No,
It was your idea?
No, it was definitely my idea. I told them that I wanted...
Did you know what that meant at the time?
Yes, I did. I watched enough TV to know.
Okay, what did it mean?
It meant for me to be able to put on some clothes, act like I'm a prostitute, try to get a guy to make an offer, exchange for services for money, and then the police team will come out to make an arrest. And hopefully, our thought process is that will open a door for us to find a lead of who's doing what as far as human trafficking in the city of Atlanta.
So you're on the street, undercover, and take me through what would happen when the guys would come to you, and how would you?
I wish I had a success story because I don't. I went out on the street and I guess I looked like a trap. I looked like I was fresh. I didn't look like I belonged, and nobody would talk to me. So I was kind of offended, but you know, the street life, when you're undercover, you have to look like you're worn. And so for me, once we got back, they were like, well, you've got on new boots, you've got on new shorts, you just don't look like you've been out here selling your body. So I've only...
So the police officers didn't know that?
Well, they did, but as far as trying to...
They didn't dress you before you went out?
No, I was dressed. I was dressed street appropriately. But you got to understand, when you're talking about people who are into this underground criminal activity, they are smart. They watch for body language. They watch for signs. They're looking for feelings. They're like, I've never seen this girl before on the street before. So, you know, it just was a vibe in the air that just looked like I could be a setup.
Okay, so then at what point were you able to find your daughter?
Okay.
And how did that happen?
It was a Wednesday night. And I was going to go to Bible study that night. I was feeling really, really low, very depressed. And so I turned on the TV instead, and I turned on TBN. And T.D. Jakes was preaching. And he said, soon as the television turns on, he said, there's a woman watching, and God says your daughter is missing, and she'll be home before Christmas. Well, it was Thanksgiving. So I was just like shouting. I was like, if you be God, if you be all of this and then some, then she comes home tonight. So I challenged him, and I jumped up, and just by faith, I just started believing that I can get her back. And I remember having an epiphany that Shadi had called me from a number, and this number that she called was when she was at the underground. When she called me one time, she was like, Mommy, Mommy, Mommy. You know, instantly I went into, you know, mommy mode. What's going on? Where are you? Talking too much. I didn't get a lot of information. And before you know it, she's like, I got to go. And she hung up the phone. Well, I called that lady back and I said, my daughter's missing, and she's registered on the National Missing Persons list. She's missing in Georgia. The police know that she's missing. You know where my daughter is. And she said, ma'am, I just gave my phone to a stranger. And she asked, can she use my phone? And I said, yes. And so I believed her. Well, fast forward back to the Wednesday night that I told you that, I was watching TVN. I decided to call that number back. So I called the number back, and a young lady answers the phone. I said, listen, I called you about 4 or 5 months ago, and you know where my daughter is. And if you don't give me the information, I'm calling the GBI, the FBI, the CIA. I'm reporting you to the police because somehow you know where my daughter is. And so she starts hollering and screaming. She's like, oh my gosh, I have to make a confession. I knew where your daughter was the whole time. I was actually in the life, and I was actually helping to hold your daughter. And she said, and I feel so bad. I've given my life to God. I've totally changed. And since then, I've been praying that you would call me because I keep my ear to the streets, and I've been keeping a tab on your daughter. And I was like, well, where is she? Because I'm going to get Officer Mark House on the phone right now so that we can, close this out. And she said, it's amazing that you called today because they're going to be selling her to a trafficker out of New York. So we were fortunate to be able to catch her that day. What had happened, we were able to break that case at Atlanta Bonding Company. She was arrested for prostitution, and she was held at DeKalb County Jail at 16 years old, which is a whole nother conversation. They released her back to the person who were trafficking her. So before they could take her to New York and sell her to the New York traffickers, they wanted her name to be released off the bond. So they were able to take her with another group of girls to Atlanta Bonding Company, because there's a lot of people involved in human trafficking, a lot.
So how were you able to get her, regain control of her that evening?
The police came. I was able to call Zone 4 Police Department, Officer Mark House, and he was able to bring everybody, the airplanes, the CIA, the FBI. They did the whole big bust. And
So you found her and other girls?
Yes. My daughter's case unraveled to 10 other girls being rescued. No, 12 other girls being rescued, the youngest being 10. So.
Unbelievable. So I think we're going to have to take a break here and come right back.
Awesome.
Welcome back to the Chairman's Circle. Before the break, we were talking about that Wednesday night when you were reacquainted with your daughter and others. So what was that moment like?
It was incredible. It was incredible to actually have gone through the whole process and to have the faith enough to ride it out, to actually get involved in the community with my local police department and to work actually the case together. Because I think if I had not been involved like I was, I don't think that I would be as passionate as I am about fighting human trafficking at the level we do.
So the police officers picked you up and took you to her?
No,
what happened?
No, they wouldn't let me come. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to come. They let me do all the stuff before, but when it came down to when the rubber hit the road, now it was a case that had to be worked. There's criminals involved, and so with the level of danger that
so you were at home waiting?
I was at home anxiously waiting.
Okay, so they picked her up and then brought her to you that same evening?
Well, it was because it took a whole lot for the intake,
sure.
but pretty much the next day we were reunited back together.
And what was her reaction?
Numb. She was numb. She did tell me, she said, "Mom, I knew that I was coming home that morning." She said, "I cannot explain it." She said, "But I knew that I had a praying mother and that something good was going to come out of that day." And she said, "I just knew in my spirit that I would be home and safe."
And how's your relationship been with her since then?
When she came home, it was rough. I mean, we went through several years of suicide attempts. It doesn't stop when you get home. I mean, it's a whole nother conversation that we would have to have. For the trauma, the PTSD, and all of that stuff. But right now, she's 28 years old. She's thriving. She's blessed me with 2 beautiful grandchildren. So we're surviving. We're surviving, and we're fighting this epidemic together.
Right. And what else have you been involved in since then? I understand that you founded an organization, or tell me about that.
I founded an organization, Fashion for Life, where we undress.
Fashion for, the number 4?
The number 4 in life. And it's basically where we undress, and redress those who have been victimized by human trafficking with the garments of hope and empowerment.
So are you a 501c3 corporation?
Yes, we are. We are registered with the state of Georgia.
So donations then would be tax deductible.
That's right.
for anyone who would contribute to you?
Yes, sir.
And do you have a staff?
We have about 3 people. We do. But we're a mighty force, because if one woman can bring my daughter home and unravel a case to bring 12 on, I don't think it's about numbers. I think it's about the passion and the effort for those who are fighting for this cause.
So, I have so many questions I want to ask you, though, but back to the relationship with your daughter. Is she living with you? Or?
Yes, she does.
Still, and the grandkids. Does she work?
She does. She's working. One thing we would like to see is that there be some kind of reentry program through our foundation that help women that have gone through this to go to college to get maybe an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. So we're working on those different programs as well, because that's what she wants to do. She wants to go back to school.
Meaning other women who've been trafficked?
Yes.
How do you find them? How do you?
Oh, they're everywhere. We have a lot of agencies that we partner with. We get phone calls. We're registered with different organizations that will call us for reference to find out different organizations that can help with different needs. So. Has there been community support for you? Yes. We did a walkathon. We've gone to Bermuda. We've been into Bahamas, went to Hawaii. We've been invited to the Philippines. We are just really beating the ground on awareness, prevention, and trying to help young girls that are actually coming out of the program to hook up with programs that we're affiliated with that offer different services. Okay, one last. What advice would you give to primarily mothers who are maybe facing a similar situation with their daughters in particular? I mean, what are the signs? I would say the signs, one of the signs I would say is when your child is going through a stage, have an open communication. Sometimes we can be a little too strict, and not saying that we don't need to be, but maybe we can focus those strengths in different areas And another thing is some things that we've been passed down, that we've been taught as parents, that went from great grandmama and them and grandmama and them and grandmama, it may not work in 2018. So we want to stay current on what, you know, the children are feeling, ask a lot of questions, be very open, not so opinionated, and then make decisions when you're not in the moment, not in the heat of the moment, having an argument and making a sudden decision, because these kids right now, they're very, very fickle. So you just want to build a solid foundation with your relationship.
Now, one last thing. Was social media involved with your daughter? I mean, was
Yeah,
she involved?
it was
Did
at first.
Did that play a part in it?
Backpage.
What was it?
Backpage.
What is that?
Backpage was a page that was used. It was the underground page that people were using to promote sexual activities with children, with people who wanted to sell themselves. So there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with social media as well. So you definitely want to have your email accounts, you want to know their passwords. You just want to be nosy to the point where you're not obvious about it. And then when you find out the information, you want to make sure you take some time to process it before you confront them, so that you can know the end result that you want.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Very
for having me.
informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. As we wrap up today's show, I want to share with you that one of the partners of our task force, Mr. Joel Babbitt and his advertising agency, created our first public service announcement pro bono. It's one of the steps that this group will take to increase public awareness. Now, take a look. Again, thanks to my friend Joel Babbitt and his team. Please connect with me online to let me know your thoughts on this topic or any other. Well, that's our time. Thank you for yours, and a special thanks to our guest today. We'll see you next time on the Chairman's Circle.